Hello everybody, my name is Griffin, talking to you guys from Rishi Outpost, and today I'm going to be taking a look back at Star Wars Battlefront II. It's hard to believe this game turned 3 years old this week, and it's even harder to believe that 3 Star Wars movies have come out since this game was released. So much about the franchise has changed since November of 2017, but few things have changed more than this game itself. I thought it would be fun to take a look back on the history of the game and specifically talk about my experience with it. Before we get started, I should mention that I'm not a big gamer in general, but I do play a ton of Battlefront 2, and I followed the news for it pretty closely throughout its development, so I'm kind of giving an informed opinion here. The story of this game has fascinated me. Battlefront 2's initial anticipation was high, but on release, it was so terrible that it prompted legislation in more than one country that outlawed games ever being this terrible again, and that's only mild exaggeration. But the developers stuck with the game, and when support ended for it earlier this year, the news was met with a wave of sadness from Star Wars gamers, as it had really turned around into a beloved Star Wars game by the time it was finished up. Star Wars Battlefront 2 was revealed at Star Wars Celebration in April of 2017. We had known about the game's existence before that, but that was when we got our first look at what the game would really be like. The trailer was awesome. It revealed we would be getting a post-Return of the Jedi story, as well as content from all 3 eras that exist in the Star Wars films. Without knowing anything else, both having content from all eras and a story made this game a huge improvement from the previous Battlefront game that had been released in 2015. The 2015 game had included beautiful graphics and fun multiplayer gameplay, but ultimately lacked the content that fans had expected from the Battlefront franchise, and it didn't have a single-player campaign. But we already knew right off the bat that this game would have prequel and sequel trilogy content in addition to the OT, as well as a campaign, and the hype was off the charts for everyone. Even people who hadn't really liked the 2015 entry to the franchise seemed to have renewed interest. I had personally enjoyed the 2015 game, but was also let down by its lack of content. I was incredibly excited for this game after the trailer launched. The campaign looked awesome, and I couldn't wait to get a Battlefront game with content from the Clone Wars, which is my favorite era. Then in the summer, we got the beta access to the game, and a lot more details about how it would play out, particularly the progression system. This is where the controversy surrounding Battlefront 2 began. I personally remember playing the beta for this game and enjoying it quite a bit, but many, or perhaps even most people, were appalled by the progression system that existed in the game. To get access to more and better weapons and abilities, you had to rely on luck in the form of loot boxes. While the boxes came with credits and parts that could be used to upgrade your cards, it was clearly structured to favor spending money on a gambling aspect of the game rather than leveling up your abilities through skill and time put into playing the game. This gambling aspect of the progression system was probably even more troubling than the pay-to-win aspect, because the game was rated T for teen, meaning it was marketed as being appropriate for people under the age of 18, and yet it was pretty clearly putting gambling as a big part of the game. Personally, I thought this system was flawed because it was going to be so slow to upgrade your stuff without spending real money. I don't have an issue with being able to spend money to upgrade your abilities as long as the same levels can be realistically attained by just playing the game. I think, however, that the game during beta was too far out of balance, but I was still looking forward to it. At the time, I didn't really know enough about the ins and outs of how the cards would affect gameplay, so I didn't share in the outrage that came about between the summer and fall of 2017, but I remember it got really heated, particularly on the eve of the game's release, when people realized that players would have to choose between unlocking heroes, even what some considered basic heroes like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, and leveling up their abilities. It all just seemed way too monetized for what was already a full-priced game. I still pre-ordered the game, but I was nervous to see how it was going to be, especially as it seemed that many people were very unhappy with it. Right around the time it was launched, however, we learned that the progression system in the game was going to be changed and the microtransactions would not be present in the game. This was a relief to most fans, though I wondered how this would affect the post-launch content that was promised in the lead up to the game. When the game finally released in November of 2017, the first thing I did was play through the story. Frankly, it wasn't terrible, but it was pretty disappointing. The campaign had been marketed as showing the Imperial and First Order perspective of the universe, something that we don't often see, particularly in video games. But instead, what we got was a pretty generic defection story where the main Imperial character ends up joining the New Republic, rather than sticking with the Empire to the bitter end. The one highlight of the campaign was the cutscene where Luke Skywalker talks to the Imperial Special Forces trooper Del and convinces him to leave the Empire. The characterization of Luke was absolutely perfect here, and it showed why he's such a good hero. So while the campaign was disappointing, I thought the multiplayer part of the game was pretty fun at launch. I don't think the infantry gameplay was as smooth as Battlefront 2015, but I strongly preferred having classes back, as they were a pretty important part of the franchise prior to the 2015 game. The hero gameplay was worlds better than the game's predecessor, which was fantastic. For a while, this was dulled by the target system in Heroes vs. Villains, which meant that one player on the other team would just run away and prolong the game with chasing as opposed to just seeing which side could get the most kills. Luckily, this was changed, albeit quite a while after the launch of the game. Almost immediately after the launch of the game, we got The Last Jedi season, which added the map Crate and the heroes Finn and Captain Phasma. It was a cool way to tie into the movie and get our first taste of post-launch content. Although, at this point in the game, the progression system was still a mess, despite the microtransactions being out. It was obvious that the game had been centered on those, so now it was just a slow and arduous process to try to level up your troopers, heroes, and ships. Making matters worse, the developers basically went silent after The Last Jedi update, as they scrambled to overhaul the game to keep fan temperaments down. EA had been the target of fans' ire for years, and it had reached a boiling point by the end of 2017. Battlefront 2 had underperformed pretty badly at launch and through the holiday season. EA realized they had to fix this game, or any future Star Wars titles they released were going to be badly hurt by the backlash from this game. However, since they had to completely change the direction of the game from what they were planning on before the launch, they had to keep fans out of the loop for months. During this time, I still enjoyed playing the game, but was very worried that EA wasn't really up to the challenge of making Star Wars games. Obviously, the game was made by the developer DICE, but the microtransaction loot box models seemed to come from corporate. I was worried that they were going to cut off all support for Battlefront 2, and that the company was going to be rendered incapable of making a good Star Wars game. But finally, in spring of 2018, we got big news. There was an overhaul of the progression system, which allowed you to upgrade your troops, heroes, and ships by playing them rather than by using credits and crafting parts. Eventually, transactions were added back to the game, but could only be used to purchase cosmetics so as to avoid even the appearance of the game being pay to win. While these changes were welcome, the summer of 2018 was plagued by balancing issues galore. At one point, Emperor Palpatine was so overpowered that the developers pulled the plug on him, removing him from the game until they got him back under control. This was both a fun and frustrating time for the game, because the developers were releasing lots of changes pretty quickly, but there were still a lot of issues with the game that made it very aggravating at times, but also entertaining. Later in the year, the new large-scale game mode called Capital Supremacy was added in. This game mode featured command posts and capital ship takedowns, two fan-favorite aspects of the old Battlefront 2 game from 2005. This game mode was cool, but games lasted way too long. Games could go on for as long as 2 hours, which is just not good for a game like this. There was also a struggle to provide good balancing in this game mode. It also suffered and continues to suffer from lag, but when it works well, it can be a lot of fun. We also soon got Obi-Wan, Anakin, Grievous, and Dooku added to the game. All of these had been heavily requested by fans, and they were all quite a bit of fun to play when they were added. By the first year anniversary of the game, the true believers like myself were vindicated. We could finally say the game was now good and getting better. The issues that had plagued the game at launch had been addressed, and it was a lot of fun to play all around. During most of 2019, I focused on leveling up all of my troopers, heroes, and ships to prestige, as well as earning all of the in-game achievements. I honestly don't remember as many specific change-by-change updates for the game during this period, but I know we got new maps for Capital Supremacy, and by the end of the year, we got the sequel trilogy era added to that game mode. We also got my least favorite heroes added to the game, BB-8 and BB-9E. I don't like these guys in the game. I think they're silly and they don't really fit my vision of what a Battlefront game is like, but hey, if people enjoy them, that's cool. I do target them in Heroes vs. Villains though, because seeing the goofy rolling droids stand next to the likes of Emperor Palpatine and Master Yoda just doesn't feel right. In 2020, we got some more content for the game, such as a few more blasters for the regular infantry units to unlock, and we got the Galactic Civil War added to Supremacy. This era doesn't have capital ship takedowns, and plays much more smoothly because of that. The winner is simply determined by who takes and holds the command posts for long enough. I honestly wish all three eras had this, because it fixes the game length and some of the poor balancing issues that that the Clone Wars and the sequel trilogy games face. Granted, due to the ATSTs and better reinforcements, the balancing in the Galactic Civil War Supremacy games is far from perfect. It was shortly after Galactic Civil War was added to Capital Supremacy in the spring of this year that we found out that support was being shut down for the game. The curse of 2020 didn't even spare Star Wars gaming. It seemed to be a disappointment, but not a shock to the developers, who had been indicating that support might continue for longer, even a month before it was ended. We don't know exactly why support was ended at this time, but I speculate that EA and DICE felt like they had added enough to the game to repair ill will with the fans, and they probably weren't going to make much more money off of continued support, now that interest in Star Wars among casual fans was likely going to be on the decline since we're not getting more films for a while. While I didn't love this decision, I think it was a logical stopping point for the game, and while it's not perfect, it does feel like a complete game, and having 2.5 years of solid post-launch content is nothing to be sad about in my opinion. Overall, I really like playing Star Wars Battlefront 2. I don't think it's a perfect game. I don't even really think it's one of the best Star Wars games ever, but I think it's a lot of fun. I have really enjoyed playing it and watching it get better as time goes on, and I'm looking forward to playing it more for a long time to come. It scratches the itch of a modern Star Wars shooter game really well, and it's a lot of fun to play with fellow friends and fans. Well, that's all I have for you guys this time. Be sure to let us know in the comments how you feel about Star Wars Battlefront 2. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Star Wars content every week. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.